Please welcome to the stage your host for Disruption Eruption, Executive Vice President, Creative Content Solutions, Viacom Velocity, Viacom Music and Entertainment, member of the Promax BDA Board of Directors, and the man going for the longest title here today, Mr. Niels Shermans.
Oh, yeah! What's happening, baby? Yeah, that is a ridiculously long title. That video was amazing, and it makes me really, really proud to be a Promax BDA member, and I'm hoping everybody here is really proud. And first of all, thank you all for showing up. You look great. Good job. And a special shout out to everybody who made it from the MoMA party last night. And also shout out to our friends at Fox for actually putting on that party, and to Promax BDA. Fox, I hear a shout out for Fox. And Promax BDA, I mean, really, what other organization can mix Monet and Jello shots except for Promax BDA? Once again, proving why this is the best organization in the industry and why we should all be proud to be able to look at Monet and drink Jello shots together. Okay, some housekeeping stuff first. Couple of notes. I'm going to go right here. First, the 10 exhibition for Promo Pathways is right outside this ballroom. Thank you to Steph and the team at BPG. Those photos are fucking hot, man. There's some amazing things in there, so please bid on them. The auction will close on Thursday at 4:45. So right before you go to State of Our Art, make sure you go and put a bid on the photography. And remember that that goes to our Promo Pathways program, which is really spectacular, and you may get an amazing piece of art. Second, as a reminder, we have hashtags attached to each session. So you can join the conversation as the sessions are happening. Like right now, you can be talking about how ridiculous I am. And you can actually continue the conversation after the sessions are over. The hashtags will be shown before and after the sessions, and they're also in the Promax BDA app for your reference. Okay, so let's dig in. I'm excited to kick off this Disruption Eruption block of sessions this morning. What we're here to do isn't simply to talk about disrupting the apple cart. It's really to understand that the apple cart will never be the same again. You know, we all right now live in this thing that everybody's been talking about for decades, the digital revolution. It's transformed and reshaped the world of linear and hyperspeed in a way that's been both terrifying and super thrilling, allowing new opportunities for us and a lot of people. And how you and your company face the change will ultimately determine your fate in the industry. Which brings me to our first speaker. I am completely thrilled and honored to invite him to the stage to talk about his experience in the space. Please welcome the founder of We First. He's an advertising all-star superstar, and really a genius and a royal disruptor himself. Please welcome Simon Mainwaring.
Thank you, Nick. Good morning, everyone. How are you? Can I echo Neil's thanks to MoMA last night and to Fox? Could you put your hands together for Promax for that incredible venue? Could you make it a bit louder, please? A bit louder? I want to make sure everyone who abused the open bar is awake for my session. You know who you are. You're still wearing the same clothes. And the fact is, despite that open bar last night, I know for a fact that when your alarm clock went off this morning at about, 7 or 8 o'clock this morning, New York time, or if you're from LA like I am, 3 or 4 a.m., I promise you, the very first words that came out of your mouth were the acronym for the conference. What the future, right? Am I right? But, it's with good reason. We have such an exciting lineup today. We're going to learn about brand storytelling. We're going to learn about social technologies. We're going to learn about metrics and analytics. But I want to start off by talking about something that's more important than all of that, which is you. We're not here for you to listen to us. We're here to serve you so that you can leave this conference and go out into your industry with your respective studio or network and make an impact for your business and culture at large. And so I want to talk about what is your role in this context. What do you take away What is all these tools? What are all these tools and analytics? How are they going to serve you in your career? And so I want to look at it through three lenses. How does it give you relevance? How does it create opportunity? And then finally, how do you create impact? Because it is so easy to become enamored with the shiny squirrel of technology out there, to lose sight of the fact that we are all human beings still sitting around a campfire telling stories to each other, because what are people doing now with conversations on Snapchat? We have to keep the right priorities in the right order, and you are the master storytellers on the planet, in which case you have a better opportunity than anybody else. And so let's talk about cultural relevance. This is our world. We all know that we live life through the lens of a screen now. I mean, I have two daughters and my wife who are sitting here in the audience, and when we watch television, my wife is on the computer, I'm doing email, my 14-year-old daughter is on her iPad, and my 11-year-old daughter is doing Snapchat. Who else has that experience at home now? Who can remember the color of their children's eyes? It has got that bad. Have you noticed, we've been here in New York for 3 or 4 days, that any time, by sheer coincidence, you have a moment that's potentially memorable, you reframe it and photograph it. And then you use face tone to do airbrushing in real time before you share it. When did that happen? When did that happen? And just as one indication of how profound the transformation has been in the last 5 years, that's the 7-year difference between the inaugurations of the two most recent popes. But what's most important is not that we all now have technology in our hands, it's that our role has changed. Those people in 2013 standing there are no longer consumers of the experience, they're content creators and producers and distributors. They're there to capture that moment to get some sort of social currency by sharing it with others. Our roles have fundamentally changed. And this is just a snapshot of, on top of the screen lives we live, on top of the increasingly mobile lives we live, these are all the different companies out there that allow you to amplify those conversations across multiple media channels. So it's no wonder that many of us are absolutely bewildered, or we struggle to keep up as we're trying to deal with the day-to-day and stay on top of all the different new tools and tactics and strategies that are available. And so this is what many of us do. And I want you to know that I'm from LA. I went to great lengths to find an image of people with their head in their sand that had sort of Equinox abs and tidy-whitey designer trunks on. Just very mindful. But this is what a lot of us do. We kind of defer the responsibility for engaging with all these tools because our plates are so full. We can't even ride the email tsunami that we have each day effectively. And instead, we sort of offset it to somebody else, we don't really engage with it fully and personally, and then we don't learn what those true dynamics are, and we don't come to understand those dynamics the same way that you do every other aspect of the entertainment business. Yet this is increasingly defining and driving our future in this business. And I say that because that's what I was like when I was working at Wieden & Kennedy on the Nike brand as a writer. I remember sitting up there in a too-tight t-shirt with my feet up on the table thinking, you can't imagine what I'm thinking. And looking out and going, those guys downstairs that are always gaming, they're talking about banner ads. Who's ever going to buy something off the web? And that was 93, 94. And then in 2007, I heard about this company called, a stupid name, it'll never go anywhere, Facebook. And I thought, wait a second. As a marketing guy who's worked all around the world, if you put media in the hands of citizens and consumers, it's going to change everything. Because what obviously was a monologue before, a broadcast monologue, becomes a two-way dialogue. And so I spent the next 3.5 years researching and writing a book about it, because I thought this was our chance, not just to rewrite the future of business, but to rewrite the future of the planet, our species, and culture at large. And so I started blogging. And this was my first blog, because I thought this was a really exciting opportunity. But as you can see from all the likes and shares and retweets, it was not a widely held opinion. But I thought it was a case for optimism, because we got away with a lot for a long time because there was no accountability, there was no transparency. There was this false separation between what a company or brand was and the image it portrayed of itself. And so as I wrote this book, I started to unpack all the opportunities here. And I started to do talks about it. But it wasn't until I had a direct personal experience in the power of these dynamics that I really came to understand just how transformative this amplification can be. And so I share this as an example. I did a TEDx talk in San Francisco, and I took the message of the book and distilled it down to a 3-minute animated video, which is a lot to give away when you're only given 18 minutes. But that 3-minute video was shared by the 1,200 TED people in the audience up in, much of them Googlers and beyond. And then those people themselves went on and shared it, and it was shared over almost 50,000 times in the first 24 hours. And I sat there and thought, oh my God, what could we do if we capture consumer and citizen attention in a way that's meaningful and relevant to them and empower them with the tools to share it and amplify our message? And that led to, in part, success of the book, but more than that, it made me realize just how critical it was to personally engage with these new tools and strategies. Because when people in your organization are looking to find relevance in the future, they're going to look for those inside the company that can be the leaders. And you need to intuitively understand it, the same way that you do all the other skills and secret arts that you have in the entertainment world. And I was writing this book before all of this had happened. Before Arab Spring had happened, before Occupy Wall Street had happened, before there were protests in over 500 cities around GMOs against Monsanto last year. Think about this. We take this for granted. But 5 years ago, no one thought that consumers or citizens could organize themselves so effectively that they could force brands to change their behavior. But just think about the last few weeks. CVS banning tobacco products, right? Because they want to get ahead of the healthcare debate. Or Subway getting rid of the yoga mat ingredient to bleach their buns, which I didn't know they did. I thought it was a Kardashian thing. But all of these brands are getting ahead of the conversation. And here's the insight I learned from all this direct experience and watching these brands. People rise to the conversation you create around them. If you pitch your product, your network, your studio, your show at a certain level, which is just an experiential entertainment level, then they'll respond in kind. Absolutely. But if you pitch it as a higher level cultural conversation that is relevant and meaningful to their lives, they will respond in kind. And think about all the consumer activism we've seen in the last few months. I mean, Abercrombie and Fitch, or the Clippers, all these different CEOs that are being asked to step aside, irrespective of what they did, mainly because they're bad for business. The noise that your customer base can generate in and around those issues is bad for business. And so companies are increasingly mitigating risk and building their reputation by getting ahead of that conversation. And so I ask you, in this room, when you think about all the different tactics and strategies you're using, whether it's getting people to vote for, any number of the shows like America's Got Talent, or whether it's Hawaii Five-0, getting people to actually, viewers to decide what the ending of the show is, or whether it's live tweeting in and around Bones with the stars of the show. It doesn't matter what it is. Are you really engaging in a two-way conversation? Or are you reaching out to them and just broadcasting more of the same? Ask yourself that. Because the opportunity is you can create cultural conversations. I don't need to tell anyone in this room the mindset of millennials and Gen Z. They are both positive in the sense that they will promote a company that does good, and punitive in the sense that they will punish you if they see that you're irresponsible, and they won't want to work with you. And you'll have a lot of extra costs in terms of attracting and retaining talent. So are you leading cultural conversations? Or are you using these very same tools with all this enormous potential just as more broadcast channels? Well, let me ask you more specifically. What does your studio or network stand for? What does it stand for? Not in the I could say it in a boardroom kind of way. But if you walked out of here and you got in the elevator and someone who wasn't at the conference saw your name tag and stood next to you and said, "There's a conference," and you were like very astute, and they said to you, "So what's it about?" And you say, "Well, it's about the future of entertainment." And they say, "Great." And they say, "Well, what do you do?" And you say, "I work for Fox." What would they say? Would they say, I love Fox because of the work it does X? Oh, I love CW because it stands for this? You know what that's called? We all know the Hollywood, elevator pitch. That's the reverse elevator pitch. When you have empowered your audience to understand your story in such simple and powerful and meaningful terms that they can tell you what your studio or network or show stands for. That's the reverse elevator pitch. Because the power of this technology is not one to many. A television commercial, you make a commercial, and if they're not in the bathroom, it goes out to everyone at once. The power of this technology is one to many. Hopefully I can inspire you, sir, to share whatever content I just put together with your 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 friends. That's the power of this technology. So if you haven't articulated what is that cultural conversation that is relevant and meaningful to their lives, you're robbing them of that ability to amplify your impact, your message, your content, your viewership. And so we need to personally engage to understand these new dynamics. So I want to ask you a question. What conversation will you lead in the future? If we're talking about what conversation will you lead? Because I stand there and I go, okay, I have a sense of what a Disney movie is all about, and I probably have a sense of what a Pixar movie is all about. But what does CW stand for? What does NBC stand for beyond Characters Welcome? What do you stand for from a cultural point of view? If you can't answer that question, we can't tell anybody else. And yet it's a profound and unprecedented opportunity for everyone here in this room. Secondly, let's look at the growth opportunity. We all recognize this. I remember my daughter, who's sitting here, she said to me not long ago, Dad, is it true the phone was once tied to the wall? And I saw this guy at another conference when he was speaking, and he had a photograph, and it was his 4-year-old son, and he was standing up against the television screen doing this, trying to swipe it. As people say, a magazine is just an iPad that doesn't work. That is the generation we live in now. And yet, we've gone from the television to these amazing 7-second screen apps that allow us to watch when we want, what we want, when we want, without any television commercials. So that's a kind of technological leap, but it's kind of linear in type. Who remembers this? Do you remember the dial-up modem? Do you remember the sound it made? And we used to wait. People like us used to wait for that. Do you know 3% of Americans still use dial-up internet? Oh yes, 3% of them. And now we have fiber optic, broadband, Wi-Fi everywhere we go, and we get so angry if we don't get free Wi-Fi everywhere, because what we're doing is really important to us. And do you remember the old Humatic tapes? Remember the sounds they made? And then the edit bays where you'd have to put all that together. And now we have Final Cut Pro and mobile. So you can be cutting things on your phone as you're putting them together. We're probably editing this in real time to show you tomorrow morning. So all this technology has disrupted the industry, and every one of you in this room has had to respond, whether they wanted to or not. But this shift in technology is different in kind, and it's a unique growth opportunity because this is what we're really talking about. Word of mouth. I love this image so much. Look how earnest that guy is with his hand on the chin. And I love the language, natural conversation between real people. But that actually sounds trite, but it's really, really true. How many of us outsource the social engagement that we're doing? How many of us, when we do engage, only talk about our content or our stars or our celebrities rather than listening to what the audience is saying? And this is the social TV ecosystem that we're all grappling with. And the reason this image is so important is the dynamics are completely different. Those other 3 examples of technology are kind of linear. You did this, and now here's a more sophisticated version of that. But really, the power hasn't shifted. With social TV, the power has shifted where it's a true real-time dialogue, in which case you need to listen as aggressively as you talk. And I deeply, profoundly believe the companies that lead the future will be defined by the quality of their listening. And so, if that's the case, what do you do strategically? When you tell your story, how must you shift your thinking? Well, it's my belief that you must shift from being the chief celebrant shift from being the celebrity to the chief celebrant of your customer community. What does that mean? That means instead of talking about yourself in a broadcast sense, even if it's in and around something as noteworthy as a celebrity, you need to reframe it and think we're going to lift everybody up on our shoulders. We're the platform that they stand on. Why? Because they have the amplification channels. So what does this look like? Because sometimes we work, the company works with a lot of big CPG companies and B2B companies around their story framing and messaging. And a lot of times I feel like the entertainment world is a little bit behind what's happening in the CPG world because they're under such aggressive attack all the time. So let's look at it. Look at the messaging. Unilever, one of the largest companies in the world with over 300 individual product brands, many of which are billions of dollars in their own right, has distilled their entire messaging down to sustainable living. Or Starbucks, shared planet. Coke, open happiness. Chipotle has stolen as much as 8% market share on the strength of food with integrity and the films that they've put out. And even some companies are going so far as Patagonia to say, don't buy this jacket. I would like you to go back on next Monday and go into a boardroom meeting and say, put out advertising saying, don't see our movie. Don't watch our show. These are very, very unusual strategies. But you know what they all have in common? They're framed in terms of the interests of the customer, or in your case, the viewer. So sustainable living, with Unilever, they now talk about Project Sunlight. And underneath Project Sunlight, they have Dove, the self-esteem, and they have Lifebuoy, Hand Washing Day, and they have all these different initiatives that are meaningful and powerful in people's lives that all ladder up to this singular messaging so that people understand that the brand is in the service of them. Or look at Starbucks. Over the last 2 years, we've seen them talk about, job creation, to boycott, campaign donations in response to gridlock in Congress. We've seen them support same-sex marriage. 3 weeks ago, when Congress shot down the Veterans Bill yet again, what did they do? They donated $30 million to post-traumatic stress disorder. Why? Because it puts them at the front in a leadership position of multiple cultural conversations that all make sense in terms of their commitment to a shared planet. Does that make sense? They are doing this to be relevant and meaningful to their customer communities' lives. Even on the B2B side, in a sense, a lot of the networks and studios are B2B companies. You trade on the success and the compelling storytelling of your products, the programs, the networks, the celebrities. But really, now everyone's looking behind those. Think, 2 or 3 weeks ago, Walmart came out and said all of our suppliers now need to be held accountable to the same sustainability index as we are. And you have to get rid of toxic products, or you can't sell through the biggest retailer in the world. Why? Because we're taking your hit. Or Whole Foods got in trouble for saying they're selling GMO-free foods because the people who are supplying them with foods weren't in fact GMO-free. So you can't hide behind your product brands anymore. Increasingly, customers and citizens are looking at you and going, well, are you part of the solution or are you part of the problem? Because we're in trouble. Whether it's climate change, loss of biodiversity, disparity of wealth, they know they're in trouble. And they come to the world looking to build their own future, not inherit their parents' past. And they're looking to you and saying, what are you doing? And you are doing things. You're doing amazing things. You're greening your sets. You're doing incredible foundation work with your celebrities. You're supporting so many meaningful causes, volunteering across the board. Disney's a wonderful example. And here we see GE, that makes aeroplane engines and other amazing things like this, talking about why they're meaningful to other people's lives through the lens of eco-imagination. Or IBM, talking about Smarter Planet. They're not saying IBM will make you smarter. They're selling you on the proposition that you will get to live in a smarter planet because of them. What story are you telling? What sort of competitive advantage could that story be in your industry if you articulate it more effectively than your competitor? Because I don't think I've ever seen an industry more competitive than the entertainment industry. It's amazing. And how does this come to life? Who here saw the mum's commercial for the Sochi Olympics? It was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. My daughter, who's sitting right there, she looked at my wife and said, I almost cried. For real. Because they touched into that human truth of the thankless, countless hours that mums put into their kids. And they didn't do it. If you look at their webpage, it says, "Thank you, Mum," by P&G. If you looked at the commercial and you saw at the end, their logo came up, P&G, but it was followed by all the different product brand logos. But when you looked at the hashtag at the end, It didn't say png.com, visit PNG, join us at PNG. It said because of you. Even at the last minute, they resisted the temptation to say, really, it's all about us. That is effective storytelling. That's why you get so many shares. Or with Unilever, the Dove Self-Esteem Project. We now live in an age where a 30-second commercial can get 63 million views on YouTube and get shared, not by you through paid media, but for free by women who find this a meaningful message in their lives. Or Chipotle, that film they put out about Scarecrow, which followed up the other film that was a viral success, Back to the Future, or Back to the Start, a couple of years ago. 13 million views almost, and now they've got their own Hulu series, Farmed and Dangerous. These marketers are very, very aware of the increasing militant nature of customer activism, and they are getting ahead of it. They are staking out a claim. It is a gold rush right now for you to look at the emotional landscape of your industry and say, we stand for this. Starbucks stands for shared. Coke stands for happiness. IBM stands for smarter. What do you stand for? That's the incredible opportunity for each of you. As the most powerful storytellers in the world, with the most incredible resources that is the envy of everybody else. And what does this allow them to do? Look at the versatility. This doesn't limit you. Because I understand in your mind where you've got all these different tentpole products and movies and things and different seasons and summer and so on. When you talk about a fundamentally human property, it's as personal as it is universal, and it's infinitely versatile. So in the case of IBM, smarter applies to smarter cities, smarter energy meters, smarter transport. But I understand smarter. I want to be smarter. I want to live in a smarter world. I want to feel like I'm smarter. So it's not about limiting yourself, it's about owning some property that's fundamentally human. And you understand that better than anybody else. So I want to ask you, second question, how will you serve your viewers' future to ultimately serve your own? How are you going to serve them? If you're going to lead a cultural conversation, you can still make a mistake, because if you talk about that cultural conversation in a self-directed way, you won't engage them. But if you lead that conversation and then frame that conversation in service of them, if you make them the celebrity rather than you, then they will share that conversation and your messaging all day long, and you'll unlock the true power of these tools. And then personal impact. We are all so overwhelmed with emails. We're all sitting here right now under the chair doing this, going, yes, Tom, I can make it at 3:30 on Tuesday. We all live those lives now, and we're trying to balance parenthood and all those other things. It's really, really hard. But we need to viscerally understand these new dynamics, because when we do, only then can we take the risks that we need to take in order to be a leader within our organizations and a leader within the industry. And I tried to think of who was the least likely person in the world to invest their time in doing this, who could have just hand-waved it across to somebody else. I think this is an actual photo of Bill Gates when they told him he had to start tweeting. He's like, what? I am independently financially sound. I don't need to do this. And I'm very private. Probably a little bit too heady. I don't want to do this. And yet he started. And he started to his blog. He started Gates Notes, which is just a journal around what he does. And he started sharing his bookshelf, the books he likes to read. And, it's a wonderful example of an organization that was so respected, yet almost untouchable in some ways, because they had such resources behind them. So really, they were the least likely, in a sense, to really humanize themselves and break down the walls inside the company. And yet then suddenly we see Bill saying, ask me anything on Reddit. There's a recipe for trouble if I've ever seen one. And then there are some things in life you cannot unsee, and I apologize for this. But Bill then came out with his own viral video. I never needed to see Bill in a chicken suit. You can't unsee those things. Or funny guy. You can see, look, I swear to God, the expression on his face, he's like, kill me. What am I doing? This is nuts. But if he can do it in the service of his mission of all lives are created equal, but also of bettering the world and eradicating the world of disease, All of us should be able to find time in our calendars to start leading conversations that will make us more meaningful and relevant to our viewers' lives. These guys, busy, but they do it. These ladies, incredible entertainers who fundamentally, instinctively appreciate the power of engaging with your audience in real time and being human and relatable. And these are some of the biggest YouTube stars in the world that have unlocked incredible potential, otherwise hitherto unknown potential for their own careers. You can launch entertainment careers from your bedroom now. And these are just some of the stars that are capitalizing on that. So I challenge you to think about what could you do in the context of leading a cultural conversation and really celebrating your viewers in the context of that conversation, and then leveraging these insights. What is your audience watching? What are your advertisers hearing from their customers? Because why should they work with you if you're not fluent in the same tools that are driving their business? And you can understand the sentiment of your audience. More and more in real time, they're defining the plots, they're defining the endings of shows, they're defining the constitution of the character. Shades of Grey, 50 Shades of Grey, the first guy that got cast, that was not a pretty thing. That was like a public lynching. That's the new dynamic of the marketplace. And so, as you listen to everybody else talk for the next couple of days, I don't want you to lose sight of the fact that the only obstacle to your success in this increasingly fractured, real-time, always-on marketplace is you. You can be the person inside your organization that frames and defines a story for your network or studio or program that sets you apart from anyone else and that transcends the limits of the actual content itself to spark a broader cultural conversation across multiple channels that engages other influencers and stakeholders. And then suddenly you become a talking point in and around that issue that all started with your program, but that was sparked by a conversation that you led. That's the opportunity for all of us. And this is the opportunity that so many other companies outside the entertainment industry are stepping into. And so the question I would like to challenge you all with is, how are you going to self-disrupt yourself? Given all the demands on your time, given all the commitments you have, given all the competitive landscape and all these different pressures, how are you going to look at this and go, you know what? We can't turn back the web. We can't turn back the web. We can't turn back smartphones. There is no way we can turn back smartphones. And we can't turn back social media. In fact, Google and Facebook are now putting balloons out there and drones and everything else out there so even more of the world will be empowered. And that newly empowered population will be a generation gap because they never went through all the really dysfunctional technology that we're now building on top of. They're just going to come straight in with a reset button. How are you going to engage that wider audience? And here's where I'd like you to start. Take a risk. Take a risk and step outside the bubble of the entertainment industry, and I mean that in the best sense, and put a tweet or a post on Facebook out there. Just one comment that is framed in terms of a cultural conversation. And where do you start? What do you care about? Let me tell you, I care about women's empowerment because I've got two amazing daughters that inspire me every day. That's my issue. Women's empowerment. What's your issue? Because it doesn't mean, this is not cause marketing. This is not foundation work. This is not purely sustainability. You can own anything. You could own joy. The conversation you could drive could be joy. It could be discovery. It could be creativity. What do you want to own? And you as a leader, as an executive at a studio or a network, are in the unique position to lead that conversation. And here's the rub. If you don't do it now, somebody else will. I cannot tell you the countless times I've gone into companies and they go, that's our thing. They took it. Real example. You know, we all know that Google, for example, gives a certain percentage of their time for people that are doing personal creative projects and they're lauded for that. 3M was doing that for 15 years. So when we went into 3M, they're like, oh my God. And here's the other thing about 3M, and this is by their own admission. When you walk through 3M, you go to their innovation center, and sitting front and center is a boot. You know that picture of the first boot on the moon? You know, the first Neil Armstrong's footprint on the moon, that image? They forgot to put their logo on the bottom of the boot. And their campaign was 3M Innovation. They missed the opportunity to own that story, to stamp their moniker on that story for time immemorial. I don't think anyone else will make a bigger marketing mistake unless Richard Branson or someone does something silly with Mars or Elon Musk. Don't miss that opportunity to claim your story. It is a gold rush now. Soon we will have 7, 8, 9 billion people in the content creation and distribution mode. And it will be very, very difficult, much like it is with URLs now, to lock up and own an area. So carve that out for yourself now. And do that. Start by putting out one tweet, something you personally care about. For me, it's women's empowerment. For you, whatever it might be that's relevant to your studio, your network, your program. Put one thing out there today and see people rise to that conversation. And see what happens when you respond in terms of their response, not what you think. When you respond in terms of what they want to contribute to the conversation. And see what happens when you start to have a visceral experience in these new dynamics that are increasingly shaping the marketplace, your future, and ultimately the future of us all. Because the future is going to be defined by the stories we tell. And we are in too much trouble now for the entertainment industry not to rise to this challenge and with all your remarkable storytelling skills to rewrite the future in which it's far, far better for more of us. Thank you so much.